Composition, compared to all the other fundamentals, seems kind of vague, right? For example, anatomy has much more concrete rules you can follow. Composition seems like it's more based on vibes and feels. While that's not completely wrong, it doesn't give us the full picture. Let's uncover the mystery of composition. Hey, I'm Stell, and this video is part of an ongoing series I have where I teach myself and you the fundamentals of art, one topic a month. In today's video, I'll be providing you with some basic composition theory and a full playlist of videos on this topic that I found the most helpful while studying. In part 2 of this video, which I'll post in a few days, I'll show you an in-depth weekly plan of effective practice you can follow to learn composition. To make sure you don't miss part 2, please subscribe and like the video. Thank you. What is composition? Composition consists of all the choices you make while framing the elements of your drawing. The goal is to create a visual balance between the elements and the space of the scene you're portraying. It's an incredible tool for storytelling and overall making your art pleasing to look at. A good composition will provide clarity and make your image readable. Composition is deeply personal because of your unique vision and the way you choose to show it. What do I really mean by that? Well, you could give two people the exact same elements and tell them to arrange them in a drawing and get two totally insanely different images. If you take away anything from this video, let it be this. When composing a new piece, ask yourself, what do you want to say with this piece? How are you going to say it? These two questions are the most important. They will set you apart from everyone else. For this particular sketch, I wanted to show a calm, peaceful scene of someone's home. I chose to show it by using several principles of composition that we'll go through in this video. Let's figure out the theory. Composition has many aspects, which I organized like this, based on a really great video I watched that I'll link in the description. The first topic we'll talk about is the focal point. The second one is structure, and the third one is balance. Let's start with the focal point. A focal point is an area of the image that immediately grabs the viewer's attention. It's where your eye will naturally look first. As an artist, you should be thinking of where you want your viewer to look, and there's several ways to control that. The first one is high contrast. Our eyes are first drawn to areas of high contrast. It can be values, saturation, detail, or motion, but whatever it is, it needs to be in contrast to the rest of the image. Alright, let me show you some examples. If you wanted to achieve your high contrast using value contrast, in this example, I used just a plain black background and a white spot. And you'll notice that your eyes will just naturally be drawn towards the really bright spot when it's placed against the completely black background. If it were just placed on a really light background, it wouldn't stand out as much. And that's what you're really trying to achieve when you're using high contrast. You're trying to show something that is different from the rest of the image. That's how you draw attention. So by placing black and white right next to each other, you're achieving the highest possible contrast. And therefore, it's a really effective way to draw your viewer's attention. If you wanted to use saturation to achieve a high contrast, the same principles from before still apply. So if you have an entirely desaturated color for your entire background, and then you, like I did, paint a really, really saturated pink flower, your eye will naturally just float to that flower. That's because it's different from the rest of the image. So the same principle still applies. Now let's try detail. Detail is a really interesting one. You can achieve it by doing a couple of different things, but still, again, it's the exact same principle. If you have an area that is really detailed, and then the rest of your image isn't really that detailed, the detailed area will stand out. So here I just draw this person's face, extremely detailed. Then I do the background, and I don't really do that many details there. So naturally the face will stand out. But there's another really nice trick to do this, and you can just blur the background. And that just makes your subject stand out even more. And the final one is motion. I find this one really interesting because it's way easier to do in animation or video, film, whatever. It's much more difficult to pull off in a still image, but you can still do it. If the entirety of your scene is completely still, like I just did trees, I did a guy standing, and then you put in a guy who's running, that's gonna stand out like something that is in motion against the entire scene that's completely still will usually grab your attention. And another nice trick you can do, kind of like you did with the background when we were trying to achieve a detail contrast, with motion contrast, you can do a motion blur. So it's something that will just smudge your drawing to look kind of like it's moving, kind of like it's not still. It's pretty cool. You can do this in any like digital software, I think, but you can also do it in traditional art if that's what you do. You can just smudge your subject and make him look like they're moving. The second way to achieve a focal point in your piece, other than high contrast, is using eyes, faces, and figures. Why? Well, as humans, we're experts at identifying faces. Something, survival instinct, something. But basically, we evolved to find faces everywhere. The same thing goes for figures. That's something you can use to your advantage as an artist. Utilizing any types of high contrast in a combo with eyes, faces, or figures makes sure to draw your viewer's attention. So let me show you examples of this, okay? Here I'm just doing 3 examples. One is going to be eyes, the next is going to be faces, and the third one is going to be figures. So in the first one, I did a really simple scene. It's just a side view of someone and their eye is showing really clearly. And you'll see that your eye also shifts towards their eye because you kind of want to look them in the eye, you know? The next scene I do is this little stick figure guy standing in a crowd. And the crowd has no faces, and this stick figure guy has a face. Even if it's simple, like our brain will identify it as a face, and it will draw your attention again, because it's a face, you want to look at a face, right? The third scene I did, to show you how figures can draw our attention, is by putting a solitary figure in a scene of nature. So our eyes will want to find another human in there because we want something familiar, you know? If the previous 2 methods weren't enough and you want to pull your viewer's attention even more, you can use guiding lines, framing, and geometry. This is what we call flow and eye movement. So, guiding lines are sneaky little hidden lines in your entire piece that point towards the focal point. They'll guide your viewer's gaze throughout the image. You want to make sure that your guiding lines and visual elements point inwards to the image so you don't accidentally lead your viewer's eye off the piece. You can use many ways to hide guiding lines in your art. Usually, people will do paths. They're a great way to guide your eye. You can do architecture, any type of structures. Anything in perspective is usually good because it also leads your eye. Framing is using elements of the environment to act as a frame for your focal element. So you use the scene to make a smaller frame for the focal point that you want to emphasize. And a bonus little thing, because I didn't know where else to sort this, is geometry. Our eyes love some good old geometric shapes, like squares, circles, and triangles, so those will draw our attention. Alright, that was all about the focal point. Let's move on to structure. When arranging our elements, there are rules that we can use to give our scene structure. The most commonly used ones are the rule of thirds, the golden ratio, the triangle structure, symmetry, diagonal composition, and L-shaped composition. Let's start with the rule of thirds. This is the most commonly used composition rule because it's easy and effective. You split your frame into thirds, horizontally and vertically. The intersections of your grid lines are great areas to put your focal point and other elements of the piece. Also, it helps with placing the horizon line because putting it around one of the horizontal lines makes for a more interesting composition than if you just put it right in the middle of your piece. Here you'll see that I use the rule of thirds to decide where to place the house and surrounding elements, and it makes for a pretty nice composition. The golden ratio is next. It's this cool mathematical sequence where each square is 62% of the whole frame. Then the next square is 62% of the remaining rectangle, then so on and so forth. If you draw a curve through all the squares, you'll get something called the Fibonacci spiral. This spiral makes for a really nice composition and also shows up in nature. If you overlay the spiral with your drawing, you can place your scene's elements following the curve and it will create a pretty nice effect. Placing the focal point where the spiral swirls more also works really well, but you can get creative with it and experiment. Let's move on to the triangle composition. Using triangles in composition shows balance and power. Triangles are the most quote-unquote stable geometric shape. You can arrange your subjects to make a triangle however you'd like. It's really versatile and works for a lot of different scenarios. Using this composition will usually draw attention to its highest point. Symmetry is making the two halves of your frame identical or near identical. It's a really basic way to achieve balance. Sometimes it can have a soothing, calming effect. Other times it can look uncanny. It's all about the context you use it in. Now on to diagonal compositions. They will often have a diagonal horizon line that makes the usually stationary scene look a lot more dynamic. It's a quick and easy way to make a scene more fun and interesting to look at. The L-shaped composition is really self-explanatory. It's when the elements of the image are arranged in the shape of a capital L. This composition is commonly used in landscapes, utilizing a very tall vertical element in the foreground and smaller elements far away in the background. Now that we've gone over focal points and structure, let's move on to balance. Things that attract our attention is the same stuff we talked about in focal points. Have visual weight. Size, high contrast of all types, figures, all of those have visual weight. Imagine these attributes on a scale. You want to have it balanced or close to balanced on both sides of the scale. How do we balance them though? Well, symmetry works, but it can be a little boring. It can evoke feelings of calm, balance, structure, but it can also seem uneasy, unnatural, or sterile. So if you're going for something like an organic feeling for a piece of nature, you'll usually want to avoid symmetry. This is why I think asymmetrical balance is best. For example, placing a big element on the left side and then several smaller elements on the right side of the piece. This also applies for contrasts. Positive and negative space. Your subject is a positive space, and the area around it is negative space. In what relation are they? If you want a really balanced scene, you should have similar amounts of positive and negative space. But there's some effects that you can achieve when you make your positive and negative space unbalanced on purpose. So when you have a lot of negative space, it makes your subject feel smaller in the frame. Similarly, if you want your subject to overwhelm the scene and be the absolute center of attention, you'll want to leave less negative space. Repetition is a great way to show the depth of space in your piece. Our eyes also like when you use several of the same repeating element. Grouping elements together in clumps creates a balanced, natural-looking effect of randomness and rhythm. A really nice method of showing depth I want to mention is overlap of elements. A really nice method of showing depth that I want to mention is overlap of elements. Our mind registers overlap as space and easily creates an illusion of depth. That's all about balance. Don't stress too much about it. It's something that will come with time. Currently, it's best to focus on focal points and structure. Alright, this was my own way of categorizing all this theory so that I can remember and understand it better. Here's a little revision chart on screen that you can screenshot and use as a reminder. In case you don't understand something, I encourage you to leave a comment or join my Discord server and ask. I'd be happy to help. I also have a playlist full of all the videos that I found the most helpful during my time studying composition. You can find a link to it in the description. Alright, how do you apply all of this? So, all of these principles can be applied to any format you decide to use, be it a landscape or a portrait. Choosing which principles of composition you're going to use should be based on the answers of the 2 questions I mentioned in the beginning of the video. So, what do you want to say in this piece, and how are you going to say it? Think of the story you want to tell in your piece, and pick the principles that you think will show that story the best. The really funny thing about composition is that you can learn all its theory, but you don't have to follow it like it's law. It's there more like a reference point that you'll practice using and then iterating on it to find more interesting compositions than just the ones you're taught. But how do we do that? Well, I'm really glad you asked. I've actually come up with a 1-week plan of practice to get you better at composition. But here's the deal. I would usually put this all in one video as I have before, but I'm actually trying out a different approach with this month's topic. So I'll be splitting the theory and practice plans each into a video of their own. If you'd like to see my 1-week plan for practicing composition and get some composition practice under your belt, go over to part 2. If you're watching this when it came out, you might need to wait for a few more days before part 2 is out. Please subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. If this video was informative, please like it and subscribe. I know that was a lot of information at once, so I've left a brief summary in the pinned comment of this video for you to review what you learned today. Please reply to it if you have any suggestions. And if you have any questions, I encourage you to join my Discord server and ask them, and I'll try to help to the best of my ability. If you'd like to see more of my art, you can check out my other socials listed in my Linktree, or just search Stelora on most platforms. And finally, if you really like what I do, you could support the channel by buying me a coffee. Thank you for staying until the end, and happy painting!